my god, no wonder I'm struggling. I've been talking for forever. That's so cute. You don't deserve rights. He messes around and he finds out the floppy paperbacks. Nothing happens in this book. Also the dirtiest talker. It's fine, no one will know. How will they know? This is going to exceed your expectations. It's beautiful. Ah! I really need to not cry. I am not okay. Ex-evangelical. She goes over the table at someone. Hi, I'm Heather from Here Booktubes, and today is my best books of 2023. I have 12 books for you today. I actually had a top 10. I do have them ranked, which I don't think I've ever done before, but I had a clear ranking. I originally had 10, but number 11, I just couldn't really imagine doing this video and not including it. And I had to clear number 12, so I went ahead and did the top 12. Let's begin with how many books I read. So of the 308 books that I read this year, I DNF'd 120, which leaves me with 188 books read. Of the 188, I had 81 5 stars. And of those 81 5 stars, I had 16 rereads. So that leaves us with 65 new to me 5 stars. I do have honorable mentions to Kristen Ashley and Ilona Andrews, two of my all-time favorite authors. For Ilona Andrews, we do the read-alongs, and I reread 5 of their books this year, and I read 8 new to me Ilona Andrews books. The reason why these are honorable mentions is because there wasn't a clear favorite book of the year from them, but you have to understand that reading any of their books is better than almost any other book that I'm going to pick up. A 4-star from them is better than a lot of other books that I read, you know, but most of them are 5 stars. It's just there wasn't any clear, this is my top book of the year. I will say my favorite thing from them this year was the spin-off Cate Daniels. I'm so happy that we're getting more Cate and Curran. So happy. And then for Kristen Ashley, I reread 2 books and I read 8 new to me. That would include all of her new releases, and then I read a series that I had never been interested in before. I don't know what my favorite from her, I guess continuing River Rain series is probably my favorite from her this year. Yeah, they're honorable mentions. The thing about reading them is that anytime I read one of their books, it leaves me wanting to read more of their books. All right, and now we're going to go in order from least favorite to favorite. Coming in at number 12, we have Queen and Conqueror by Isabelle Olmo. This is the first in the Queen's Red Guard series. Specifically, I had never heard of this book before. It was shared by another Latina author on Instagram, I believe is how I ended up seeing it. But they hadn't read it, so they didn't, you know, have any glowing reviews. They were just sharing. And the synopsis is that she is going to stop a war by marrying the man who killed her husband. And I was like, I'm sold, I'm in. And I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know if it would be an immediate DNF. I didn't know anything, but I absolutely loved it. There's something so satisfying about picking up a book because of the marketing, because of what it was marketed to you as, and it living up to those expectations and delivering on that premise and being exactly what you hoped it would be when you heard about it. So this queen does arrange a marriage to stop the war between their peoples, and she is a brilliant ruler. She's the smartest person in the room, and her new king doesn't really love ruling. He enjoys fighting, but he does not enjoy ruling, and he has a lot of trauma around his own father not being supportive and things like that. And he had a lot of abuse as a child from his father and his brother. This series has a lot of content warnings, so this book is pretty dark in a lot of ways. The romance between the queen and the king is not dark. They're actually incredibly healthy. I love their banter. I love their dynamic. She's very type A, in charge, strict, and like I said, the smartest person in the room. And he is a bit of a goofball, but as more of a front rather than that is all of the depth of his personality, which is one of my favorite character types, where it's like, let me act the fool a little bit so that you underestimate me, but in reality I've got something to stand on, right? So I love their dynamic. Their romance is not dark at all. They're actually quite healthy and they really love each other, and it's so cute. But the world as a whole is quite dark. You're going to have some pretty severe homophobia, more so referenced in the past, but it is pretty awful what was done to some side characters. And also you're going to have side characters killed, maimed, etc. Quite a few content warnings. I don't really love reading stressful, dark books or anything, and I wouldn't label this as that. It just has a lot of that in the world. But it was such a clever, fun fantasy romance where the plot and the world building really lived up to my standards of actual fantasy, but the romance was there, and the romance was living up to my romance standards, and that's such a hard combination to find. I was so happy to find it. The characters are really diverse. All of the queen's guards are women, and you follow some of their points of view, and it's just an incredibly interesting world, and I am really looking forward to continuing this series. At number 11, I have Zeni by Rebekah Weatherspoon. I picked this up for a Giving Authors a Second Chance Try a Chapter challenge, and this first chapter made me laugh and made me cry. I loved this by marriage of convenience. There's a lot of grief in it, which I would normally avoid, but it was handled so well. It was funny. You have this giant Scotsman, I believe, and he's playing bagpipes at the funeral of her aunt, and that's the first time that she meets him. They were so sweet to each other and so cute and so delightful. Such a delightful romance, but honestly with so much depth, like emotionally. Again, like I tried to avoid the emotional reads, but there was so much happiness and lightness to break up kind of the grief and the emotions that we went through. Again, the hero has a toxic kind of abusive family and has to deal with exes being biphobic and that really affecting his kind of view of himself. But I loved everything about this book. When I think of it, I am happy. I had heard nothing but good things about this book, and I really should have listened sooner. Number 10, I have Returned to Monte Carlo by Cate C. Wells, one of my favorite authors. This is a 80s romance, and it is consensual non-consent. If you do not like that kink, you will not like this book. I do like that kink, and I love Cate C. Wells. Cate C. Wells can write anything, and I will read it. And the way that she does angst and betrayal, and where like you start the book and you're always ready to kill the hero. You're just like, you don't deserve rights. And then you go through, you know, all these emotions, and then by the end you're just like, I'm so glad you two worked everything out. And that is not the dynamic that I like to read about. But when Cate C. Wells writes it, it's what I like to read about. He is a very wealthy Italian count and billionaire and yada yada, and she is just a poor girl from Texas. They meet, and he has the whole Madonna and the horror complex where he's like, I shouldn't be doing these things to my wife, especially my pregnant wife. So this is a secret baby. She leaves the marriage when he once again fails to love her. And, you know, he worships the ground she walks on. I love it. I love it so much. I would have read 700 more pages of this book. Number 9, I have Hostile Takeover, which is Blackwood Billions #1 by Christina C. Jones. When I heard that Christina C. Jones was writing a billionaire forced marriage of convenience, darkish romance, I was like, please be everything I've ever wanted. And it was. This has such a satisfying scene in it. So this man, basically her dad is worthless, useless, and he possibly medically abused her mother, and then also sold her family business out from under her, basically. And he sold it to this guy. And this guy is willing to let her keep her family business if she marries him, and also provides a child in the first year or two. She's not happy, but her mother's company means a lot to her. Her mother has passed and she's willing to do this. So they do, and he plays around, he messes around, and he finds out he finds out that she is not the one to be bringing this to. So he tries to manipulate some things. She handles business. She takes care of it. And it's so satisfying. And also he's very protective and possessive and really wants to provide for her and make her life easier when he's not being an idiot and messing around. He has a grandmother who is not doing well. Aware of that, you have a failing family member. And that's a big part of the reason why he is rushing this marriage and having children. He's very alpha. You might not like him, but honestly, she can handle him. She can stand up for herself, and he needs to be everything that he is to be able to keep up with her and be worthy of her. And that is the dynamic that I love when it comes to power couples. Number 9, I have Seduction of a Psychopath, The Badlands, number 3 by Elsie Winters. This is a cozy, sweet fantasy romance. There's no plot. Nothing happens in this book. And it was everything that I wanted it to be. This is my favorite cover of the year. I just love the style of her book covers. And I really do think that you won't love this book nearly as much if you haven't read the rest of the series, because our main character is a Grim Reaper that we have been following. He's the roommates of a couple of the other heroes. Grim Reapers are immortal. They often have arranged marriages because you don't leave spending eternity together up to the youngsters. So he is only he's not even 100 years old yet. He's incredibly young for a Grim Reaper, but his grandmother arranges a marriage for him with this fae woman of a family that she really cares about. And she has a chronic illness and she is on death's door. She's actually in a magical coma to try and preserve her life until he can marry her. So she has a chronic illness. They don't know what's wrong. Nothing has been able to fix her. She is dying, and she's also quite young for a fae. His magic, being immortal, they can make their mate immortal also, so that they don't spend eternity alone. His magic will heal her, but is not an instant process. And Elsie Winters is a Own Voices chronic illness author, and I felt like this could have gone very wrong, and it didn't. It was handled wonderfully. So she will live, but she is still going to take weeks and months to make just even the smallest improvement. And in 5 or 10 years, she'll be unkillable, basically. But right now, she's still very weak. So they prop her up with potions and things for the wedding. And then the wedding, they exchange magic. But again, it's not an instant fix at all. So then they're going to have to sit through a wedding reception. I was just at a wedding reception last week. They last for freaking ever. And she just is not up for it and doesn't want to do it, but has to do it for the pomp and the ceremony and the duty. And he is absolutely not. And he steals her from their wedding, and they escape into the night, and they go to one of his family ancestral homes, and he just nurses her back to health for weeks and months. And it's just them, really. Getting to know each other, even though they're already married. It's so sweet. I love them. I don't think many of you will love this book the way that I do, but for me, I love it. Number 7, Sinner's Isle by Angela Montoya. This is a YA fantasy, although she is 18 and he's 19. There is a love triangle that was handled wonderfully. I loved the resolution for this. And it's not one of those love triangles where you don't know who she's going to pick. She very clearly is in love with one person, but might be forced to marry another. But you like the person that she might be forced to marry, so you're conflicted. So in this world, any women with magic are considered sinners, and they are kept on this island, and they are cursed, and the church, is against them, but they can have redemption by being magically tied to a man, and the tithe goes to the church. Being magically tied to them controls their will, so their magic is controlled by the man. Everything about them is controlled by the man, and in doing so, they can find repentance and the world is safe. She has a very powerful magic. There is a new king. He is 19. He was just crowned and he needs to pick his witch, basically. And because of her powerful magic, it's almost definitely going to be her. She tries to escape with her friend. That fails. And in the midst of all of this festivities and all of the nobility being there to pick their magic users and to hobnob with the powerful men of the church and use the witches as they want to, a pirate prince washes up on shore and she kind of has a thing for him. This was Latina, queer, joy. There was so much the world building. We were like, oh, I don't know how they're gonna get out of this, but then it was so funny and so sweet the whole time. So you would have like these really stressful moments of, because she doesn't have agency, everything for her is decided, and the king doesn't really have agency, and the pirate is like one false step away from being arrested, and everything is a mess. And yet also the characters are so freaking delightful. They're so delightful. I loved all of our, friends and our main characters. I loved these three. I loved the way it was resoluted at the end. Like, truly the ending just made me so happy. Very open-ended ending with them, going off and living happily ever after. But oh my word, I loved it. It made me so happy. It was the most just pure enjoyment fantasy that I've read in forever, and I loved everything about it. I did think that we would be like on pirate ships and stuff. We're really not. We're really doing everything on this island. It was fantastic in every single way. Number 6 is Jesus and John Wayne by Kristen Dumez. This is a nonfiction that I feel like I am the target audience for. So again, you might not find it so interesting, but for me, I grew up the daughter of an independent fundamental Baptist pastor. We are very conservative, religiously, politically, all of the things. And I had a couple of big breaks from not only my church, but also the Republican Party. And those big breaks were Trump and BLM. When people change their tune on Trump, not just people in the Republican Party, but people in my churches, I was like, oh, so you all don't actually stand for anything. You don't stand for anything, because if this man was a Democrat, you would be talking about what a deplorable place America is that a man like him could be running for president. But because he's a Republican, he can do no wrong, and he is the second coming of Jesus himself. I couldn't get over it. I couldn't believe the people that I knew were just so pro-Trump. And then with Black Lives Matter movement, specifically the protests in 2020, also all of COVID, everything with that. Again, I was just so appalled at the position that my churches and pastors that I knew, I was so appalled at their stance, which was basically all lives matter. And I was just like, okay, I'm so done. I'm so done. For me, those were two huge life-changing events, really, because I couldn't be like, okay, we agree on some things, we disagree on some things. It was like, no, I don't agree with any of this at all. And then this book is really talking about not only Trump and not only BLM, but how the evangelical Christian movement and white nationalism, how much it has shaped politics for the last 100 years, how anti the civil rights movement they were, how they were pro-abortion until politically it became conducive to be pro-life, Just all of these things with names that I recognized from my religious experience and then people I'd never heard of, and just this whole history of the way that I was raised and the things that I was taught to believe, this whole history that I had never heard of, that wasn't taught in my schools, wasn't taught. I was homeschooled, but I also went to some Christian schools. This is us, and our history is not even taught to us. Even though for me, I was appalled, but for them, I think in a lot of ways they would agree with it. It still wasn't taught. And this was just a book that I was sucked into. And again, for me, it was just so eye-opening. Not that things surprised me, but the depth and the history and the way that they shaped the nation and the way that they also shaped my religion, that surprised me. I didn't know a lot of it. And I consider myself to be someone who knows a lot about the history of my church and stuff because I've grown up on it. It was just a fascinating read. I don't think it will be nearly as interesting if you're not a ex-evangelical deconstructing, but for me, it was fascinating and appalling. I specifically read this because of Mara at Books Like Whoa. She talked about it. What a fantastic recommendation. Then I have In a Jam by Cate Canterbury. I read this because of Steph at Novelty Corner. It's no surprise she's raved about this book all year. This is another marriage of convenience between high school friends. She's been away for several years and she comes back. He's been in love with her the entire time and she doesn't know that. He is grumpy and quiet and also the dirtiest talker. I loved so many things about this book. So when he was a kid and in high school, he was fat and had really bad acne. And now as an adult, he's shot up in height, he's thinned out, he is a farmer, he does manual labor all day, his skin cleared up, and everybody who sees him takes the time to let him know that those things happen to him. I just wanted to punch people for him. Honestly, I'm just like, oh my God. I don't know. I really empathize with this idea that if you lose weight, you're worth more, or if you don't look as hot as you did at 18, then somehow you are worth less. And I just really liked the way that it was explored. And I liked the way that the main character treated him. And she is a burned out kindergarten teacher. She inherits this farm, is told that she has to marry in order to keep it, but she has a year to get married. So she's just going to live on the farm and he's like, I'll marry you. And she's like, oh, okay, for like the farmland? And he's like, sure. So for him, he's marrying his dream girl and she doesn't even think that it's real. Ah, my baby. And then he is a guardian to his niece who is 5 years old, has gone through a lot of trauma. Her mother is in prison for life because of some mistakes. She swears like a sailor, like a pirate, and she's the most delightful child character that I can remember being on page in a minute. She is the best. And there's no third act breakup in this book when you get to where you're like, oh, this is going to be a breakup. No, they just hug and talk and are like, it's okay. I will say that there is a small child endangerment thread where the little girl goes missing, but she is actually completely fine. So that resolution, completely fine. Everything's fine. So know that it's okay. They were such a sweet little found family and I loved them so much. So much. So apparently I had 5 marriages of convenience / arranged marriages on my top 12. Number 4, I have The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. I think that anyone who reads this is probably going to have it on their best of year list the year that they read it because it is such an excellent execution of what it promises in the premise. Like when I say that this book was perfection, I mean that. She is a witch and she lives in modern times. People don't know about witches because it's considered not to be safe. And witches attract magic. And because of that, witches really cannot spend a lot of time together because the more witches there are, the more magical buildup there is and the bigger magical fiascos you can have occur, and the more likely you are for discovery. There's also a spell that went wrong hundreds of years ago. So every witch is an orphan. Their parents die shortly after they are born. So she has grown up incredibly lonely, and she's making YouTube videos about being a witch. She's like, it's fine, no one will know. How will they know? Well, somebody knows, and she gets contacted to come to this house and help these 3 young witches control their magic by this specific deadline that they have. And she's like, y'all shouldn't even be together. Like, what is happening? But she agrees, and they have 4 caretakers. They have the young grumpy librarian who does not want this witch here, is like, we're fine, we don't need help, I don't think this is a good idea, I want my objection noted, I don't think she should be here. And then you have a older gay couple. One is very dramatic and one is very down to earth. And then you also have this older housekeeper, and they are the most delightful found family you've ever seen in your entire life. And then you have these 3 little girls, and I love them. I love them all so much. There was so much more romance in here than I thought there would be, and that was really a pleasant surprise for me. I loved their romance. I loved every single one of these characters. The plot, I didn't think that there was going to be like really any plot. The plot was surprisingly satisfying. I really liked some of the things that we got in this book. The characters, the writing, it's just like, if a witch and a found family cozy fantasy romance, if that sounds good to you, I am telling you, this is going to exceed your expectations. Okay. Number 3, I have Last Light by Claire Kent. I love Claire Kent. This is her dystopian book that is longer. The world was hit by a meteor, and that kind of messed everything up. So you have a lot of people with lung issues that are dying. Obviously, all of infrastructure, all the electricity, everything is gone. So people are just surviving. And they had a little town, but they've used up all of their resources. And so the town went on the move to try and go to one of the larger settlements and hopefully survive that way. But she had a grandmother who was dying, and she refused to leave her. He had a child that was dying, and he refused to leave her. Both of those people have passed away. I will say, you explore it a little bit about his child dying later in the book, but she is the only POV, and he's very closed off emotionally and very quiet. So you do eventually get there, but not as much as you might think that you would. And it also talks about how grief is still there, but it's different when you've watched so many people die and you're trying to survive yourself. They are both on their way to try and meet up with their town. They decide that it will be safer to travel together. So he is much older than her. She's like 19, 20, 21, something like that. And he's in like his early 30s. I loved this age gap because it talks so much about how if the world never ended, they would have never been together. He would have never looked at her. He would have fixed her car, and that was it. She would have continued to date a nice boy that she met in high school. He wouldn't have died. You know, all of these things. That their relationship just wouldn't have happened if they had other options, if they had a different life. But because the world ended, because they spent all this time together, because of how changed they were by the ending of the world, now this is their person, and it's beautiful. Also, as a ex-evangelical, her singing "Be Thou My Vision" around the campfire, it got to me. It got to me. I will tear up just thinking about it. I don't know why, honestly, that affected me so much, but it really, really did. It really, really did. So, you know, you're just following these two, trying to reach the people that they know and falling in love, even though maybe they shouldn't. And that's so sweet. And I love them so much. I really need to not cry before these last 2 books because they will do me in. Oh my god, no wonder I'm struggling. I've been talking for forever. Number 2, my favorite romance book of the year is Roleplaying by Cathy Yardley. I love them so much. I realize that's my thing for everything, but this is a 50-year-old man and a 48-year-old woman, and they meet on an online game. So that's what the role playing is. She has a college-age son. He's taking care of his failing mother. He already took care of his father while he died from cancer. He is a hospice nurse, but he is taking time off to take care of his parents. His parents are not really grateful. They don't really love him. They're not very nice to him. And they're also very biphobic, as is his ex-girlfriend. So these two meet playing online. He thinks that she is a much older woman, and she thinks that he is a college-age boy. And then they meet in real life, and it's hilarious. But they are both introverts. This is a love letter to introverts. And you're also watching this 50-year-old man learn what being demisexual even is, and learning that he's not weird and he's not broken, and it's just part of his queerness, and like finding out that there are other people out there like him, and I'm gonna cry. Being able to set up boundaries and get a better life. He's very golden retriever, lets everybody walk all over him, and she's very black cat. One is such a huge grouch, is not afraid to tell people, no, I don't want to do that. I want to stay home. And then also so willing to fight for the people that she believes in. There's another scene in this book where she goes over the table at someone, and yes, because how dare you be biphobic to him and homophobic, and why would you do that? And then you get to see them at the end where like he's no longer dealing with his toxic family because he's put up boundaries, and she's helped him with that, but he did it for himself also, and they have moved and are happy, and I love it was just so beautiful. Yeah. It's one of those things where if you are going to have a book where they're like really being taken advantage of and they're struggling with boundaries and stuff, this is how I want it done, because you get that satisfyingness of, no, we're not doing this anymore. And I just loved getting to see them be happy. I am not okay. All right, and my favorite books of the year is a series, but I do have a clear favorite, and that is the Rook and the Rose series by M.A. Carrick. The only books that I bought physically because I loved them so much and wanted to have them physically in order to annotate, which I've never done before and I might have gone overboard on, but you don't understand. Also, the floppy paperbacks, and I love them so much, Your Honor. I love them. My very favorite book of the year is The Liar's Knot. My babies. It's a fantasy series that I read completely because of Angela at Literature Science Alliance. I'm so grateful to her for just the way that she described this book. And there was something that she said about this, about the really clever characters, that just made me think that it might be my thing, and it really was. This is a completed trilogy. Every book is the same length. Every book is amazing. If I read them different years, they would all be my top book of the year probably. We follow Ren, who is a girl from the streets, and she is a con artist. She's trying to worm her way into the nobility, this one particular family. Follow her, we follow some of her support system, found family, we follow the family that she's trying to infiltrate, we follow the constable that the family is friends with and is trying to get to find out if she is legitimate or not. He is indigenous and is viewed as a traitor because he does work for the law enforcement. We also follow a crime lord who is the wealthiest man in the city. He's gone legitimate, but he can't break into the nobility because he's from the streets. And he's my favorite character. I love Fargo so much. He's like the adult Kaz Breaker? Angela also said this. I completely got this from her. And I can absolutely absolutely follow that. It is the adult Casbreaker. Also, for me, this is, if you love the Queen's Thief series by Megan Whelan Turner as much as I do, this is a great adult, like, natural progression. Again, like, they're different, but I think what makes them so interesting to me is present in both of these series. Our con artist is mixed race. She is incredibly clever. She's so smart, and she can charm anyone. She's such a fascinating character to follow up, honestly. And then you also have this masked vigilante. So she's pretending to be a noble woman who grew up in a different city and has never been to this city before. But she's actually a street child from the city who's been away for the last 10 years. And so she is indigenous, and she has a connection to the city's history and magic system, but has to pretend to be one of the nobility. The nobility have their own system of magic based on astrology, and then the indigenous people have their own system of magic. It's based on tarot cards. The world building is immaculate. Everything has a purpose. Everything is incredible.
Also, this is a queer normative world. I especially really liked the way that trans people were part of society and part of the world building, like a natural part. And also, I have a complete spoiler-filled vlog on this trilogy, so that was a fun project I did with it. Also, if you like Tamora Pierce, you should read this.
And the character work is phenomenal. I love everything about this series. It did take me a tiny bit to get into that first book, but then I was sold. And the middle book, my literal favorite, the finale, everything that you could hope for, perfection. I wouldn't change a single page. Love these characters more than anything. Anything in the world. So I actually read Mask of Mirrors and The Liar's Knot twice this year. Just incredible in every single way. I think that it works best for character-driven readers. I think that it works best for people who really love court intrigue and the matching of wits between characters, which for me is so satisfying. When an author is smart enough to make really smart characters, like so much smarter than me, match wits with each other and just like impress you as the reader and be like, wow, I could never do that. That's just so impressive to me. Like, I don't understand your mind being that intelligent, that clever, that able to work all of this together. I don't understand it, but I love reading it. So that's it. Those are my favorite books of 2023. Unbelievably long video.
Also, I forgot to say I do have a favorite novella video, so all of those shorter books are separated out, but I love them just as much. I'm a novella stan.
I love them so much. Let me know if you have read or want to read any of these. Don't tell me if you read them and didn't like them. I don't care. I don't want to know. Thanks so much for watching. Bye!